homosexuality condemned, uncontrolled prostitution, and a dictator addicted to sex. In today's video, we're going to delve into issues of sexuality that occurred in fascist Italy during the 20th century. Get ready for a journey back in time and to explore the perversities of the authoritarian rule of Il Duce. Welcome to military history. During fascism in Italy, a period ruled by the dictator Benito Mussolini, homosexuality was harshly persecuted, and those identified as homosexuals were confined to an island within Italian territory. In addition to the horrendous racial laws that severely restricted the civil rights of Italian Jews and other ethnic minorities, homosexuals suffered a devastating impact during fascism. Considered contrary to traditional male ideals, homosexuals in fascist Italy were subjected to discrimination and oppression. Prior to and during World War II, in totalitarian Italy, homosexual men were labeled as degenerates and often assaulted by authorities. While no discriminatory laws against sexual dissidents were enacted, the government created an atmosphere where open manifestations of homosexuality could be forcefully suppressed with the approval of the population. Chilling statements from authorities of that time included, "We realize that public dances, beaches, and mountain places are frequented by many of these sick people, and young people of all social classes seek their company. These accursed effeminates are corrupting our people." With this backward and violent mentality, authorities were determined to stop what they perceived as the spread of degeneration and to contain a sexual aberration that offends morality and is disastrous for public health and racial improvement. For this reason, gay men hid, as recounted in the following testimony.
Si teneva sempre nascosto, se ne parlava con scherno, con smorfie, che non era possibile dire io sono omosessuale.
According to alleged good customs, these men with different sexual orientations were seen as a menace that needed to be attacked and eradicated. Not only did the gay community itself face rejection, but homosexuals also undermined the image that dictator Benito Mussolini wanted to project of Italian masculinity. Fascism was considered by its proponents as a virile regime. Therefore, Italians saw themselves as strong, masculine, and of a superior race. They considered it impossible for homosexuality to exist in a fascist regime. Since Mussolini believed that this condition was a foreign vice imported from Germany or England, unrelated to Italian blood. Hence, the strategy was to cover up the issue as much as possible. In 1938, dozens of men believed to be homosexuals in Catania were arrested and sent into internal exile. An archipelago south of Italy became the setting where authorities sought to erase gay men from the national map. About 600 kilometers away, on the island of San Domino in Tremitis, these prisoners endured harsh detention conditions. They were expelled from their homes solely based on suspicion and interned on an island as if they were mangy animals. These groups of men arrived in handcuffs, treated like criminals, and were housed in large Spartan dormitories without electricity or running water. During their transfer to the cells, soldiers mistreated them, beat them, spat on them, and derogatorily called them femminile, a disparaging term for effeminate men. Once installed on the island, they were forced to perform forced labor for meager pay, eventually being considered to some extent as slaves. The prisoners knew that the exposure of their homosexuality had caused shame and anguish to their families in deeply conservative cities and towns. In those days in Italy, being a gay man meant not being able to leave one's home, let alone make oneself noticeable. The police would arrest and punish anyone displaying such behaviors. It is profoundly ironic that in Italy during that time, they could only find a certain degree of freedom on a prison island. For the first time in their lives, these men were in a place where they could be themselves, free from the stigma that normally surrounded them in their devoutly Catholic country in the 1930s. They were confined under prison rules, but some found that life in the country's first openly gay community was a liberating experience, as recounted in a testimony from that era.
Questa vita, se continua così, non mi dispiace affatto. Il cameratismo, tanto screditato dal tenente, in fondo è divertente.
Despite nearly 100 years passing, the suffering has not ended for the gay community in Italy. While they are no longer chained or sent to islands as prisoners, homosexuals are still not considered first-class citizens. This is evident in the fact that the state does not extend any legal rights to same-sex couples, laying the groundwork for a deeply fascist Italian community that refuses to die. However, confining them to islands as if they were perverts or contagious illnesses was not the only way Mussolini's crude regime had to combat homosexuality among virile Italian men. Prostitution was in an anomalous position in fascist Italy during the mid-40s occupation. Under the fascist regime, state-run brothels with authorized prostitutes were allowed, even encouraged as a normal part of the life of the virile fascist male. Records from the time indicate that society accepted the presence and use of brothels and sex workers. The government did not seem to see the contradiction between promoting prostitution for fascist men and the concept of the good wife for fascist women. However, during the war, this activity posed a significant problem for the Allied occupation forces because many men contracted venereal diseases, adding to an already severe labor shortage. It also posed a serious concern for Italian authorities, not only due to the spread of illegal and unlicensed prostitution, but also because many normally respectable women were drawn into the vice network out of economic necessity, to the detriment of themselves, their families, and society. Although the risk of sexually transmitted infections was present in most scenarios during World War II, one of the places with the highest number of infections was southern Italy. The terrible hunger endured by the population in this region in the last months of the German occupation led many women to offer themselves to soldiers in exchange for food or shelter. According to a report from Allied troops, out of 150,000 women in Naples, approximately 42,000 were engaged in prostitution. Makeshift brothels proliferated throughout the city of Vesuvius, many of which were nothing more than large halls where exchanges of favors took place without any privacy, visible to everyone. Prostitution was also widespread on the city streets, and it was as sad as it was common to find a young man willing to offer his sister's virtue in exchange for a can of food to help the family survive. This situation meant that when the Nazi occupation ended, women were not attacked as in other territories, such as the Netherlands and France, where prostitutes enjoyed a higher status that generated resentment in the population, as seen in the following archival material. The prevailing promiscuity of the time caused a violent epidemic of gonorrhea among Allied troops in the winter of 1943 and 1944. The military authorities, alarmed, reacted by conducting an intense awareness campaign, although it was not enough for the soldiers to take the necessary precautions. Within this campaign, one element would prove somewhat controversial for the soldier who put it into practice. It was a small booklet printed in Italian, featuring large letters that read, "I'm not interested in your syphilitic sister." This pamphlet was supposed to help soldiers avoid daily temptations offered to them on the street, but it actually became a source of unexpected conflicts. The troops, not mastering the Italian language, would sometimes show the paper directly to a Neapolitan who approached them for any other reason or motive. Upon reading the disrespectful reference to their sister, undoubtedly the most outrageous insult for a Southern Italian, the offense was met with immediate retaliation. This led to attacks and killings between locals and Allied troops who were supposed to liberate them. This over-sexualization of Italian society, whether through the promotion of prostitution or the portrayal of the Italian man as a virile male providing satisfaction for ladies, had one and only one responsible figure: Benito Mussolini. Mussolini was responsible for establishing a fascist regime in Italy, built upon the ideas of supremacy, nationalism, and racial purity, which he maintained from 1922 to 1943. Beyond his fixation on sexuality and being considered a depraved or sex addict, the truth is that the reputation of the unrestrained lover and libidinous symbol of Il Duce was well known throughout Italy during his time in power. Furthermore, his sexual appeal was a way of asserting dominance. If no man could match his exploits in bed, no man could challenge him for power. This basic and masculine reasoning was how Il Duce managed his relationship with both power and sex. Great historical dictators, aside from their political personas, often hide a dark side in their private lives. For example, much has been written about Adolf Hitler's sadomasochistic or incestuous behaviors. Regarding Benito Mussolini, however, more documents are emerging that certify the Duce's sexual obsessions with the numerous women who passed through his office. The Italian dictator was a sex obsessive, a sick individual with brutal behaviors. For the fascist leader, making love was synonymous with violation, and his sexual desire was insatiable. Mussolini's amorous escapades have been referenced in numerous biographies, and his chauffeur's memoirs claim that the dictator had relations with over 7,000 women during his rule. According to testimonies from the time, sex with the dictator was fleeting, lasting no more than 5 minutes, during which he showed no concern for the satisfaction of his occasional companions. He behaved like a beast in heat. His megalomania was such that he tried to avoid strong-willed women, or those with a certain initiative, because it nullified and sexually inhibited him. He needed to dominate both inside and outside the bedroom. He enjoyed perverse sex as long as he was the one in control of the relationship at all times, a kind of 50 Shades of Grey with a fascist twist, where Il Duce decided all the terms of the relationship. The dictator had an abusive and perverse habit. Hundreds of love letters arrived at his office daily from all over Italy. The correspondence was sorted into 2 categories: letters from new women and letters from known women. The latter were discarded, and a new filter was applied to the former, leaving a list of names for the police to investigate and verify the physical attributes of the candidates, ensuring that the relationship did not pose any risk to the supreme leader. After the check, Mussolini was shown their photos, and those he selected were invited to share an intimate moment with him. Of all these women, one lover in particular was his great love, Clara Petacci. She was his confidant and chief concubine, for whom he professed a devoted love, which in no way stopped him from satisfying his voracious sexual appetite with many other women, of which Clara was fully aware. In fact, it was precisely her diary that became one of the historical records that allowed posterity to portray the dictator's character. As described by this historian, based on Petacci's diary.
Mussolini, perhaps like other busy executives, I don't know, finds time to ring his lover a dozen times a day, and every time he rings, she writes down. The diary is really scrawled, often with quite short entries, and then she'll flip the page over and scroll down some more.
He met Clara in 1932, at that time being married for 17 years to his second wife, Rachele Guidi, with whom he had 5 children and from whom he never divorced. He was 49, and young Petacci was only 20. Initially, they used to meet at church on Sundays and then spend the entire afternoon engaging in wild sexual relations in Mussolini's office, a custom recorded in the young woman's diaries. I kiss him, and we make love with such fury that his screams seem like those of a wounded animal. Petacci described the sexual encounters with the dictator as an almost barbaric act, boasting that sometimes they lasted for hours, copulating until Mussolini's heart hurt. This animalistic lover's fury was expressed by Mussolini himself in his manner of addressing his young lover, noted by her with a mix of fascination and fear in her diary. I love you madly. I would like to devastate you, harm you, be brutal with you. Why does my love manifest with such violence? I feel the need to crush you, to shatter you, a violent impulse. With you, I'm a wild animal. She had her own room in the Palazzo Venezia, where Il Duce set up his government. Additionally, she had her own bodyguards and chauffeur, as if she were the First Lady. Clara was the only one who could contest the love that had, until then, belonged to his wife Rachele, who was also fully aware of her husband's escapades, but accepted them as more of a carnal necessity than a mark of infidelity. The machismo bias that tinted the fascist ideology is clearly distinguishable in these aspects of the relationship of the authoritarian Italian leader. Some authors claim that Mussolini had some kind of illness that constantly obsessed him with brutal and violent sex. However, this seemed to fascinate Clara, who, at the moment of Duce's capture, chose to stay with him and die by firing squad instead of escaping, as immortalized in this archive.
The bodies of the ex-dictator, his mistress, and fellow fascists were left lying in the square, and the enraged Italians took the opportunity of kicking them and flinging rubbish on them.
These have been the impressive and depraved stories of sexuality during fascist Italy. This concludes today's video. We appreciate you reaching this point and look forward to your presence in the upcoming installments of Military History.